Hello, everybody. And if you're listening to this, you have selected episode 5 of See You at Mike's. I'm Trevor Binstock.
Is it five really? I thought is it six? Five? Is it five?
Four,
You would know. You're the counter guy. I
This is
mean,
definitely 5,
all right. It's five.
right?
It's
I'm just
definitely April 6th.
that's is it?
You've selected the April 6th episode of See You at Mike's.
um yeah, he's Trevor. I'm Prem.
I'm Tyler.
I have this rule in my life, and it goes like this. Anytime that I am enjoying something, some sort of hobby or game, that has multiple people are part of it, and I enjoy getting better at it, seeing my skills grow. As long as I want to continue feeling like I am good at this thing or am progressing the way that I should or have any sort of value in that hobby or whatever, at all, I have to stay off of that subreddit because you will find the best people in the planet on that subreddit that are doing things that you would need 3 lifetimes of the time you're putting in now to get even close to that point.
Yeah.
And it's good information, like lots of like tips and tricks, but sometimes I just, I have this mental image of what my progression should look like, and then I see one post on there and I'm like, oh, cool, I haven't even started this thing.
Yeah. That's a really good call. I feel like as someone who just wants to get better at things generally, like I feel like there's just like most things I do in my life, I'm like, man, it'd be cool to be like good at this thing. I feel like I'm really, and also like secondarily, like I'm also want to be someone that like knows the way around Reddit a bit more. Like I want to be like not like a Redditor per se, but at least a Reddit observer, like a good wallflower in Reddit. Like I know which walls to flower upon, if you will. So with both those desires, like I feel like I'm definitely like agreeable to visiting these subreddits, because I also feel like potentially there's like a way that like maybe like something will like be unleashed when I visit these said subreddits, where it's like maybe like some sort of like mechanism inside of me will like click properly. It'll be like I'll just sort of turn into one of the machines myself. Maybe not like the top tier machines, but like no Optimus Prime, but like a good mid-tier,
Bumblebee.
like solid protagonist transformer
Jazz.
that like like the kinds that like come and go within like
Ironhide.
different scene. Yeah, okay, well that would be insane to be that I feel like is a good like B plus.
So, yeah, it's
kind
definitely
of like
upper
tier.
level.
Yeah.
So if I could get there maybe after being unleashed, that's what I would say about the subreddit discourse, is that I think you're right, Trevor. I think my conditions for now, as someone who isn't in like sort of absorbed in them that much yet, like the grass is greener. Like, like, oh, it seems like it could be cool and maybe it'll like make me, but that, I guess time will tell after I start becoming a Redditor wallflower who's aspiring to become better at the things that I want to be better at, which is most things.
I think the thing that I notice most in going on Reddit and what keeps me away from Reddit the most is how much people like how much someone's reaction to something is based off of the imagined intent of what someone said. Like
Isn't that just the internet?
That's the internet in its entirety, but also in life with like how people act towards each other. For example, let's say someone you're working retail, okay, and someone walks by you, and you're the retail worker, and you're trying to put your meat in the rack. Okay, that's not a euphemism. You're literally just trying to put your sandwich meat in the sandwich meat rack. Okay, and you don't notice, but there's a lady standing behind you, and she's standing there for who knows however the heck long, and you finally notice her, and you move out of the way, and she goes, finally, and grabs it. Now, you have the prerogative as a person who received that to assume whatever you want in terms of how she feels about you. And you can say and take that as personally as you want. It is your power in that situation to do that.
Yeah.
You don't know anything except for finally.
Yeah.
You don't know a goddamn thing. And so people's reaction to that sort of thing is, well, I was just doing my job. I gotta defend myself. I'm not bad. Fuck you, lady. Fuck you. You know? And like that sort of thing on the internet is turned up to 11 because nobody knows what anyone is saying ever. And so it's pure self-preservation through hatred of other people.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get too involved in comments unless I like see that no one else, like I have something useful to say. But I remember there was one circumstance. I'm on the Keyforge subreddit because me and Brett were playing and we couldn't find, this rules discussion anywhere. So I was like, I'll just take a picture of this card and I'll post it on the subreddit with this question. And so, you have the title so people kind of know what they're getting into. And I titled it Game Theory Discussion. And then the subtitle was my question. And people were answering it, got, the same answer. Everyone was the same consensus, like this is what happened. And someone answered it and he was like, also, this is rules, not game theory. And I was looking at that and I was like so ready just to like be like, just tear this guy apart. Be like, what is game theory other than just an in-depth rules discussion? Like that's, and I'm just like thinking about that, just like staring at this comment. And I was like, or I can just kill the app and have that post get buried for all time in the mountain of posts on this subreddit.
Yeah.
It's like, I probably should do that.
Yeah.
Right. Sweet. Also, the amount of the lack of ability to read or see sarcasm, where it's like sometimes there's a comment, and all the comments responding to it are trying to figure out if the original comment was sarcasm or not.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, this person obviously knows that is not what it is. No, that person's a fucking idiot because they thought that thing was that thing.
I will say half the time I feel like someone is like maybe being sarcastic online, like, and they might like when they actually are. Sometimes like those people are still like kind of like awful in some way, like they're like, and like their response will be like, oh, guess I didn't have the sarcasm button activated. But like honestly, sometimes I'm like, were you actually maybe like you weren't being sarcastic and you're just trying to like dig yourself out? Like I feel like I see that happen on Twitter a lot.
Yeah.
Where it's like someone will just like have like a not clearly like black and white thing, but like they're saying like the wrong take. Like not in like a mob mentality way, but just like what they're saying is like probably wrong. They're like, oh, I guess I forgot to hit shift sarcasm. And it's like, like all right. I mean, I don't know. I think we talked about this before, but I was editing some Wikipedia articles for work one time, and
that's cocky.
It's no, actually, this actually relates to the comment in a way. Is that the Wikipedia could have been, and I mean it is like a faction of the internet, but like how people behave on Wikipedia could have been like how people behaved on the internet, which is to say that like, even though it's like this open source thing where like anyone can like conceivably edit articles or like change things or whatever, there's just this like mutual trust between enough people that use Wikipedia and like help contribute to Wikipedia such that like most people kind of like also like kind of follow the codes of conduct and like the pirate code of the 7 Cs of Wikipedia. Like it's like very much like there are implied things and then there are like explicit things, but like even if like you are like not someone that's familiar with them, or maybe like you're even like kind of crazy, you kind of like there's just like this overwhelming sense of trust and like understanding between enough people that like you're here to do your job. You're gonna make the article, make the internet easier for people to learn new things by virtue of like helping create a Wikipedia article about something,
Mm-hmm.
You'll try to cite your sources as best you can. You'll all sort of moderate each other, help each other get better, help each other improve, and also like because it's not just about like making sure like the articles are factual, but like holding people to a certain standard of like editorialship such that like they can continue participating in Wikipedia. Like it's very much like, yeah, like there's not like some sort of incentive pyramid per se. We're like, oh, one day you can be like the best Wikipedia editor ever, but just like, you know, this is how we do things here. You know, this is a formula that we collectively as participants of Wikipedia have kind of like ended up at, and we'd like you to, you know, try to emulate it. We have like this sort of like anonymous kind of like chat room where you can like seek the wisdom of more experienced Wikipedians. Like it's very much like this could have been the internet, like broadly.
Yeah, I've edited 133 Wikipedia articles.
We could have just designed Wikipedia as a giant pyramid scheme. And it's like, as you edit or create pages, you like gain credit, and then you can like recruit people, and then their credit you get a cut of, and they can recruit people once they've like edited a certain number, and pretty soon you can just be like the wealthiest in just Wikipedia clout. And you've got like, yeah, I've got 3,000 people in my downstream right now, all out there creating Wikipedia articles. So like, I'm kind of the king of this shit.
and so that's actually like not a model of what we want, because that's how like most of the internet is, which is just privatized and pyramidized.
Yeah. I remember getting the Amway spiel from someone, and then like,
oh yeah, baby,
2 years later, seeing the guy at like Culver's in Grand Forks, and I was with our roommate Josh, and I like whispered to him, I was like, this guy tried to get me an Amway like a couple years ago, and I was like, I wonder if he's still doing it. And sure enough, he walks over to like one of the workers who was on break and is like, hey, I run a small business with my wife. And I was like, no fucking way, he's still on that grind, man. Get out. Oh gosh.
It's the same energy of like who after high school either has a kid or is getting married. You know, be like, dude, that's crazy. That's that person. And they have a kid now. It's like, hey, you know that person from high school? Yeah, they're in a hot pyramid scheme right now.
Yeah. And there's always like the of course stereotypical like random messages like, hey girl boss, what's up? What you up to? I'm doing this really crazy cool new business I'm a part of, and I'd love for you to tag along. Or it's like, what's up, dude? Like, not sure if you've heard of like Man X
semen pills.
Yeah, it's this crazy hit new thing. Like GNC is like we're in talks with GNC. Those talks have been happening for like maybe a little too long, but like we're talking.
Yeah.
And you should like, it's this wave, dude. You just gotta hop on. It's just like we call it more of a partnership or like a collaboration. It's like a team sort of atmosphere. So yeah, dude, I know we haven't talked in 7 years, but we should totally, I mean, you know, like I always admired you back in, you know, 7th grade.
Yeah.
You always seem like you had a real go-getter attitude. A real eye for business. Come learn the business is always part of it too. I think this is going to be like a totally new skill set.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
but,
what do you do?
But it's also something you can like, it's an entirely new skill set that you can learn in like 2-week training sessions.
Or in someone's like weird basement.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you can get all the knowledge of a business major by just meeting in this studio apartment, and we're all just going to kind of like sit on stools and
drink beers,
learn the biz.
No, it won't be beers. It'll be the product.
Oh yeah, sure. You got to give it.
Please. Please. But you have to, it's not free. You have to, like, you have to pay for the product.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But you all have to have it. Like, if you go to the meeting, you can't turn it down.
Right.
Because then when you're hawking that product, you have to be drinking it.
Yeah.
Using it.
It's so
walking
good.
on it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I did. My brother got into Amway, and the toothpaste that they had was,
gosh.
I really enjoyed their toothpaste, not going to lie.
Yeah, that's how they get you. They get you first they use you with the toothpaste. Next thing you know, you're just like bottom totem pole. You guys, I think we've talked about this before, but the Dream podcast is called The Dream.
Yep.
It's this I think I mentioned it. It's this great little like mini investigation into like pyramid schemes, like
multi-level marketing.
Multi-level marketing, excuse me.
Thank you.
And like just like the it goes like beyond like the superficial sus nature of it, and like totally like it's like the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme where he's like, you know, drawing all the strings together, except like it's very
Pepe
much like
Sylvia?
not psycho. Yeah, but it's like it's not like crazy. It's just like, oh, like this sucks. Like these people are like connected to some of the worst forces in society.
Right.
Which reminds me, I'm pretty sure the Orlando Magic Stadium is the Amway Center.
Maybe.
If I remember correctly. Let me live fact check myself.
Do it.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're at? What do you do if you're at the club and this guy approaches your girl and says, "Hey, do you have any interest in forex trading?"
Yep, it's the Amway Center.
Dope.
All right. Yeah, so I'm a reputable and trusted source is what that exercise was for.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of reputable and trusted sources, what's on the docket for today, folks?
The docket. Last thing before we move on, while we were on this conversation, I thought of a new band name. We have a list of band names on the door of this music studio that I'm in.
Yeah.
And all right, let's check it out. You've heard of the band The Wallflowers, right? With the smash hit One Headlight.
Yeah.
All right.
Now check their more punk counterpart, The Wallweeds.
Hell yeah, brother.
Okay. All right. I'm into it. I'm into it.
You're not allowed to take it now. It's going on the list.
Yeah, it's on the list.
My
capital T, capital L.
My solo project in music, if I ever do it, is going to be named Ill Digested and Misplaced.
Oh.
Well, we'll probably get into it. It'll make sense once if we ever get into my like theory on thought and like how we move through our alienated state and relative nature with thought, and how a lot of like our sufferings and a lot of our frustrations and problems are really just like ill-digested thoughts and misplaced energy.
Okay. I'll have to read some of my other band names some other time too. We got like also,
my internet has been fluctuating, so we might be a little choppy on the stream side. I don't know yet, but
sorry to all of our fans. We know there's so many of you out there that will be impacted by this. So
that wasn't a peace sign. I was holding up a 2 for our 2 fans.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of the dude from Midnight Gospel. He gets like 1 new subscriber.
Yeah.
And so
what's his name?
Just watched it too. The dude is really something hoops.
Yeah, gets the ice cream.
Yeah.
And his dad comes in.
Is it Michael Hoops?
I don't know.
Something like that.
Well, what do you got for us to get into?
Right on. All right, so sort of like episode 2, which was a start of a really good conversation, I will state this problem that I see myself having just with the way that I interact with the world and think, and love bringing up to you guys because I always gain new insights from your unique perspectives. So let's say that I'm maybe listening to like a TED talk, listening to someone that I really admire, a good professor, or reading a book, reading someone's bumper sticker, anything like this, where I see like a little piece of something that could be motivating, like, yeah, that sounds right. That's what I want to do. Just like little snippet. Rather than, I shouldn't say all the time, but very commonly, rather than taking that piece of information and thinking, okay, in what ways can I do that for myself? Rather than doing that, where my mind goes initially is I will think about somebody who does that really poorly. Like let's say we take someone's like think of, any situation as, well, someone's got to do it. It might as well be me. My knee-jerk reaction isn't to go, yeah, let me do that. It's to think, oh, man, true. This person, not like that at all.
And
They're
I
an
don't
asshole,
like them.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like them and how they do that. And so I want to be as far away from that person as possible. I want to be the opposite of that toxic person that I don't like, that isn't doing this thing that I think is really motivating and good. And so, yes, you're looking in the right direction initially, but I realize that where the problem lies in this is that as much as you want to curate your psyche and the way you want to behave and the habits you want to create, you aren't going to be able to do that effectively by paying attention to the opposite of that. Because, people say you become what you hate. Well, that's not true. You become what you pay attention to.
Right.
You become what you give energy to and what you surround yourself with and fill your mind with. And people just say you become what you hate because people have a tendency to focus on what they hate, stew about it, think, oh, I hate that. I hope I never become that. I hope I don't act this way, but then you're sitting all day thinking about that.
Man, I hope I never die.
Is naturally going to gravitate that way. So, yeah, I think I call it negative motivation, and it seems powerful. It seems, it's like carbon monoxide. My body wants to take it up a lot more easily than it does healthy oxygen. It's just more readily available. It's more attractive to my cells, but it's super not good for me. So that is my topic of discussion.
Right.
That was carbon dioxide was an interesting choice.
I've never huffed, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah. When did you first, I mean, it's like two questions. One is like, when do you think you first started noticing this? But two, do you think like that tendency happened before you noticed it? Like you could like trace to a certain time where you like sort of viscerally remember like one moment when you're like, oh, like you remember a moment where like your motivation was like sort of framed in this way.
Yeah, I definitely
I'm curious
probably won't be able to give you like a really good timeline, but I think it was sort of like this conflux of like a few things that sort of sent me down this way. One of them is probably having roommates. And not to say that this would be from the roommates specifically, but when you just like start to get to know people really, really well every single day, it's more easy to like find those things. It was that. It was starting to, which I don't think is really a bad practice, but like recognize different types of toxic people so that you can, and I've sort of got like a 3 or 4 like categories I can put them under. Recognizing toxic people, and so I can like see triggers earlier and just know that going forward as I try to like curate the best people to surround myself with. And obviously I'm not like shitty to those people after. I'm like, okay, this is that kind of toxic personality, perhaps in a way. And then the other one is just when I started thinking more about, like I'm out of high school, started college is why it's this, as well as like I started living with roommates. So that's probably like the best point of origin here. I'm thinking like I'm out of high school. I'm like more my own person. I started thinking more about like, all right, what kind of person do I have to be and what kind of habits do I build so that when I become an adult, I haven't spent the past few years inadvertently becoming this person that I don't want to be. Like putting like mission statements on my wall so that I'm spending these years,
Well, shit. Internet
say like
just
those
cut
3
out
things.
Real bad. Can you say what you were just saying again? The internet just cut out real bad.
Yeah, how far? Just like real quickly there.
Yeah, like maybe 3 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. So last one, came to college, started having more like autonomy, figuring out the type of person that I want to be. And so like being more mindful about that's good advice, that's bad advice, that's motivating, that's toxic.
Yeah.
So let's call it start of college.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. SWAT, do you feel like you've related to this in certain ways, and do you have like certain moments or times that you kind of like think of when you think about this sort of dynamic?
Yeah, I think I relate to it a lot, especially the like figuring out how you don't want to be, like,
Mm,
or like moving through this like transitional period of life and accidentally falling into a personality and a life and a being that you didn't choose or didn't want.
yeah.
I especially noticed like how many of the adults in my life and like teachers, mentors, anyone who I met that like was a future or a figure that pointed me towards a better future, and how um like horribly dissatisfied, scared, anxious, and lonely they were as people. Um,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that like they're not good mentors or they aren't great people. It's just that like in my mind, the bar for people is like, I mean, it's really low, and I'm there too. Like I think we mentioned, we're my belief is that we're all little baby children who accidentally grew a big enough brain to like conceptualize things, and so we're trying to like figure all this shit out when our brains are way too big. Um, so it's not necessarily that I think lowly of everyone. I guess it's kind of like I feel caring and maternal, I guess, towards everyone in everyone's like a child sort of way. Um, yeah, and the twoest biggest moments for me probably were graduating high school is one of them,
Mm,
and going on to
mhm,
doing college, and then the other one was dropping out of college and going on
mm,
to a like spiritual contemplative path.
yeah.
And one of the things that Trev brought up that I have an idea about, which is what makes this sort of thought pattern so compelling and so prevalent is so experience, right, is what is happening. And uh like the experience is the isness. And then that experience gets broken down into data in our brain. Synapses firing chemicals, ones and zeros, whatever you want to call it, code. That experience gets broken down into data. That data then gets translated into thought. And thought exists in a space of relativity, that something can only be relative to another thing. And that's how we define experience through thought. That's not how we experience things. We experience things as they are, not relatively. But in the translation process, when it gets broken into data and then translated into thought, it turns into a space of relativity, because that's how we can speak it, that's how we can conceptualize it. And so what happens is this like kind of reoccurring pattern of like witnessing things that you want to be. Like, let's say I want to be a musician, and I read about a young musician who's like 18, super successful, really talented, amazing, and I'm sitting here and I'm 22. That, in certain circumstances, can be really demotivating. It can feel really bad to have someone younger than you, more talented than you, sexier than you, and more successful than you. I think I already said that. That can be a demotivating, a hopeless sort of thing of like, I didn't do it, I'm not good enough. But looking at someone who is below you in that relative space of like, you know, hey man, this 43-year-old dude who's in rural North Dakota still kicking it, strumming his little guitar and singing country classics at the bar, that's dope. I like, I'm not necessarily as successful as him or whatever. I'm shooting for the stars, whatever the fuck it is, but like he's still kicking it. It's much easier to conceptualize yourself in a space where you have a ceiling that you can go up. And that ceiling starts with like a base level of like, where's the bottom? Where am I? And then let's go up. Instead of looking at the ceiling of like, where's the top? Where do I want to be? Who's there? And where am I? Way down here? Man, that fucking sucks. So I think it comes from that sort of like, obviously, billion times more complex. I mean, I started talking about like experience being broken into data, but I think what's compelling for me in that process is the like, in the relative space, what is more motivating is looking at a person and seeing your relative above them and then reaching for your ceiling instead of witnessing someone at your imagined ceiling and seeing yourself way below them.
Interesting. It makes me think of like I think what you're describing, like just how like sort of natural this is. Like it makes me think of like all the like shows and movies where like this is like a built-in trope, like about the mentors. Like like think about just like any movie or show or book with like a mentor character or figure, and like in X, Y, and Z way, they're obviously like a guiding force for the protagonist, but there's always one like specific fatal flaw that like of course like every character has their like quirk or flaw, but like it's very kind of blatant in the mentor figure where it's like it feels oh sorry cut out there it just gets to the point where it feels like the director or writer or author or whatever like is like kind of like implicitly like just like behaving in this sort of like natural way where it's like, well, the viewer or like the viewer through the protagonist or the protagonist like will see this person and like see themselves relative to them and like know like, oh, I don't want to be like, even though I like am learning these things from them, I don't want to be like them, I don't want to end up like them. Like an easy example is just like Haymitch from the Hunger Games, where it's like, yeah, like, you know, he's been around the block, he knows the games, but like at the same time Katniss doesn't want to end up as this like grizzly old drunkard who like is like, you know, alone, like despite any wisdom or like lessons they can get. And of course this is like a very specific and not necessarily a great example because there's a lot of baggage Haymitch kind of has and like things that Katniss wouldn't relate to, but like I guess that's the kind of the point too, is that like all these mentor figures will always be like just so like the contrast will be so blatant where like you as the viewer will feel that, or reader or whatever will feel that discomfort too, or that negative motivation. Like it's just like because it's just so salient. Like the creator of the art maybe doesn't even like intentionally do it all the time, but because they also have that in their own selves, like it just comes out and manifests, and then we respond to it because like we also feel that way. Like we don't want to end up as the drunkard,
right?
Like that doesn't, you know, have a lot of friends, or like he, you know, succeeded in the game, like he won the games, right? That was the whole thing. But like he, you know, but if you won, you wanna be the champ, or like the protagonist that everyone knows, and not like the grizzly old guy that's like stuck mentoring people in District 12, which is usually the losers. So I mean, which is all just to say that this is just so like natural. Like it's like I think if most people thought about it, they could think of a few moments or even like ongoing that like it's kind of like, oh yeah, like I just do that because, you know, it's like it's a motivator. It's like but it's like how much of that is sustainable even, like because it also, this is something we've talked about before, but it's like you don't have like actual direction, you just have sort of like anti-direction, like where you're not gonna go,
right?
You know, like but when you have 360 degrees of places to go, you know, you kind of have to pick a forward vector and not just like a bunch of reverse vectors, I suppose.
Yeah. I also think about how, like, in my practices, something that I do is kind of like flip the script on relativity. I mean, the everybody is a baby with a too big of a brain sort of idea is this flipped on that script of like, like the relative nature of our thought experience, like that is background to what is going on here, which is the experience that's happening. Like experience happens through the happening. That is the isness. That's like when people talk about, be in the flow, be in the here and now, man. Don't think about the future. Fuck off the past. Be here, be now. Like that's what they're talking about is like trust experience, be in experience, because experience is experiencing. That's not in a space of relativity. It is through our processes that it turns into a relative space. And what that happens is a sort of like turning of like things that were in the foreground, like what type of person do I want to be, how do I want to function, what I want to do for my work, like how do I want to be perceived by people. All those sort of stuff when you're living in this relative space is very foreground. That's at the forefront of your mind. And experiencing, being in what is happening is at the background. Like that is like it's just like kind of the light little trickle as you're worried about all your bullshit. Flipped around, it's like, oh man, like look at me, I'm a silly weirdo with a beard and long hair and I live at a retreat center. Like, ain't that groovy, baby, but the whole time it's just experience. And I could be sitting here as a hardworking fucking Amway dude telling people that me and my wife run a small business and I want you to get involved in it because I care about you so much, but still be that groovy guy that's just experiencing the experience. And so like I think it's something that we can dig into, maybe the sort of pendulum-esque idea of like getting off the motivational train of like relative self. God, the sanity ship has sailed and it's not coming back.
The sanity ship has sailed. We need some lighthouses. We need to like locate. We need to return to the dock.
Right. If any of that's compelling,
Trevor,
I mean, that's all I care about.
I mean, yeah, definitely like good perspectives on it. And bringing the pendulum into this, like you definitely can see it, and almost like the whole idea of the pendulum is it discredits finding solutions to the problems that exist because of being on this one axis, which is exactly what I'm going to talk about more. But it would be either I'm positively motivated, I'm pulled from above versus pushed from behind, being on the other ends of this pendulum, and outside of that would be like the relative space. Let's backtrack through the mind and just stick to the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Very virtuous. Try to do it, but I got to stick on the pendulum for this one because I think that I have some things that like need to be addressed and figured out before I can focus more on experience.
That's fair.
Perhaps. So from like what you said, yeah, it is. Part of it is really natural. Like I said, it's like the sugar, it's the cheap energy. It's not necessarily what's best for you, but it just like it feels most available. And I think about like a lot of stories in the Bible and just, like Jesus as a dude and why like so many of those stories are so compelling as you think about like his interactions with like lepers or the blind, people that healthy people are like, get away from me. I don't want to be seen with you. I don't want to be around you. I don't want to pick up your conditions, And Jesus was like, here, let me sit with you. Let me spend time with you. Let me treat you as if, we're the same. So, this is sticking with the people, everyone else that was like, no, get away from me. You're looking at the people below you, and it's like just as compelling to try to get away from that than it is to look at your idols and try to get towards them. And like I get trapped in this. It feels almost addictive when if I indulge that for a second, I will slip. If I like see someone, I'm like, oh yeah, that person totally does that like this. That's annoying, man. I hope I'm not like that. And then I'll like go on about whatever I'm doing and be like, just in the back of my head, like, man, fuck that person. Like, I bet this person would do it like that too. Like I'll get stuck in that.
Yeah.
And a big thing, with meditation and mindfulness is being able to see the thoughts coming into your head, recognize them, sort of like watch them go, and just, have a little more agency about how to then change the thoughts going forward. And that's really appealing because a lot of times not a lot of times. There are some specific times when I'm sitting there and my thoughts are just kind of happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really frustrating when before I was able to really recognize that happening, it was like, whatever, I'm just in a bad mood. But now that I recognize that happening, but I'm not skilled enough to do anything about it, it's really frustrating. I feel like a passenger.
Here's something that might be fun to reflect on. I don't remember where I got it from, but someone talking about meditation where like thoughts were just happening, like they're happening to you, not like necessarily you're thinking, but you're being thought. Like these thoughts are there. You didn't choose them. You didn't pick them. And their thing was like, at some point, I noticed through my meditation that these thoughts weren't personal. And that, like the lady in the store saying, finally, when I noticed that, I had the prerogative to choose if I took this thought personally or not. And so you could have a thought that's like, that comes, and the idea of attachment is if you invest your existence with that thought, you know, and our common reaction is, well, I thought it, it's there, I did it, obviously, so it must be me. But when you are doing these meditative practices and you start to feel that pull of like, fuck, these thoughts just won't stop.
Yeah.
And you get that sort of like, oh, these thoughts aren't necessarily personal. It's not necessarily me.
Yeah.
That's something really interesting to like chew on, something to meditate on.
But also with that too is that I think it's interesting that this conversation is also very like sort of inherently sort of like individualistic. Like it's very like focused on the self, as in like what your view on this is, because it's like you responding to like people that you think are toxic or like negative influences or people that you like aspire to be. But it's like it's about you. And it like is kind of like premised on this kind of like static nature of the people around you. Like if we're not thinking about like role models or like
you might want to
anti-role
mind your
models.
clicking with the pen, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Like if we're not talking about like role models or anti-role models, like just like sort of people that you know that you admire or don't admire, like part of it is not just that like, oh, like I do or don't love how this person behaves in this way, is that also like we're all operating in this operation of like motivation and comparing ourselves with each other. And if you kind of understand that like we all are doing this, and as Swat is saying, like we're all kind of like many, if not all of our thoughts are not necessarily just ours, but a sort of like construction of what's around us, of where we're from, who we are, and the people we are around, then there's like certain synergies there, certain like common anxieties there. And I think because of that, and Trevor, you used the word agency of, you know, being able to kind of like choose agency. And Swat, you kind of pushed it forward, and agency.
Oh gosh.
Side note, that's a sort of like inside bit about some high school thing. Sorry, you guys won't get it. You guys had to be there. But you know, Trevor, you talk about agency in terms of just, you know, like sort of like kind of like trying to emulate the things you want to emulate and pick the things you kind of want to like hold on to, and like Swat, you're kind of pushing it forward in terms of like what thoughts you choose to sort of accept or invest your like energy and like attention to, in which you kind of like dismiss as like, these are here, like I don't have to like hold on to them. We also have the agency to not just like behave as ourselves and try to like formulate ourselves as like avoiding certain things or emulating certain things, but also to influence those people around us. Because if we are looking at other people, people are also looking at us. And perhaps they're avoiding certain tendencies that we hold, but also perhaps admiring certain tendencies that we hold. But regardless of what that is now, oh, sorry, I was clicking. Regardless of like the current state of like, I have X, Y, and Z characteristics that people admire, X, Y, and Z characteristics that people hate. That is the current moment. But you have the agency from now until whatever the end of the timeline is to kind of reflect on, you know, the ones that you like, not just for your own self, but to hopefully like connect with those similar anxieties that other people have. And that perhaps the people around you that you think, oh man, I really hate that they do that, perhaps as they're looking to you, like you can kind of like have some sort of connection there, you know? Like I think that is just kind of like, I think once you understand that people in general are just trying the best they can as humans responding to the things around them and sort of like responding and behaving in just their environments, then it's much easier to both like kind of get less mad at people or like get less frustrated at people when they're just like being annoying or like being rude or whatever. And also perhaps leads you to not just sort of get yourself away from negative motivation, but have the positive motivation, not just for yourself, but for other people to sort of like connect in a certain way and figure out how you can get better alongside other people, not just in comparison to other people. Yeah. And I think that is kind of complementary to sort of SWAT's, you know, formulation that like, you know, we're all just big babies that have grown larger, you know, like we're all responding and growing. And if we actually like took that to heart and not just been like, oh yeah, like that's true, like aha, lol, like we're all like growing and we're all like, you know, thrown into this tough world, but actually like, oh, it's not just that, it's just that you, me, and the person down the street are literally all sharing that relationship, sharing that relationship of being big babies and being people responding to the things around us. Then you start to get, you know, more personal release from all these like constant like things like, God, like that guy sucks, like, or I definitely don't want to be like that, like just because like it's not necessarily like whether it's good or bad to feel that way, but it's just like it's more on your brain that just doesn't have to be there. Like it's taking capacity and space from just this sort of like idealistic like goal of just trying to like understand the persons around you as sort of being in the same just vat as you are. And it because you're all in the same vat, obviously everyone's going to compare themselves against each other because all they have is the people around them to compare themselves to. There's no like golden standard. There's no, you don't have a conception of that. You just know what you don't want to be and what you think you want to be. But like in releasing yourself from that pressure a bit, not only are you like hopefully like being a capital G better or capital B better person. I was going to say good, but better made more sense in that instance. But you're also freeing things from your brain. You're freeing the negative vibes, but also like you're just giving yourself more capacity to like, as SWAT said, experience. Because experience also takes a lot of capacity, and it takes a like you talk about like, oh, how can you experience if you're always like in this like mode? Well, like that's also the flip side is like if you can acknowledge the sort of common anxiety that we're all going through and these common questions of like, oh, like negative and positive motivations, you just sort of slowly start to combat those in a way and like release yourself. Well, then you have the capacity to try to figure out what it means to experience. And beyond that, maybe just begin experiencing, because like the other stuff is just not taking up as much room in your head rent free of just like, gosh, that guy sucks. Rather, it's like, oh, I wonder why they're behaving that way. I wonder maybe if I'm behaving that way too sometimes. And maybe I'm not. And maybe I feel better for not behaving that way. So maybe how can I sort of connect with this person to see if they're kind of falling into similar things that I fell into previously. It's like Wikipedia. It's like Wikipedia. The golden age of Wikipedia.
I think it's really interesting. You're like, I wrote down this note about when Trev mentioned Jesus and how living in this relative space, what I described there of like experience being broken down and moving into thought, that is the like ego force that alienates us from our experience as humans the experience of the whole process of everything going around. However wide you want to make your environment, you know, like if you're a groovy baby, you'd say the universe or whatever, or like God's will. But like when you brought up Jesus, like his thing was flipping the script on alienation and reintegrating people together with God's will or creation. And like the way that you do that is by loving others as yourself, which he points to. That comes from, I don't know, Deuteronomy or Leviticus. And his other one, I think Leviticus is the love your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind. And then Deuteronomy is love your neighbors as yourself, or vice versa. I don't remember. But these Old Testament texts that were like thousands of years old by the time that Jesus was alive, and they're thousands of years old by the time we're alive now, like these are the things that he pointed to reintegrating people with feeling connected with each other and creation and moving through this million, billion, trillion year long process as beings experiencing. You know, if you, I don't remember who said it. I wish I had a better brain for like crediting people. But I hope that they are loving and open enough spirits that they don't mind that I kind of plagiarize them a lot. But, you know, someone said that like the human experience is the universe experiencing itself. Because of this process of like experience being broken into code that's being translated into thought, that's being transferred between people, that's getting turned back into thought and then data, then put up against experience. That like through humanity, in our conceptualization of it, we have the ability to be fully integrated with what is happening. This like process that's going on.
Yeah.
And through our like ego mentality of relative space and relative being, we separate ourselves from each other. We separate ourselves from creation. We atomize ourselves and bring us into a little kind of cell of like, I need to be something. Whereas flipping the script breaks that open into, instead of feeling that like everything in life is happening to you, that like everything, you're a part of everything that's happening. That's my experience, at least. It no longer.
Well. That would be our experience, wouldn't it?
You got me. You totally just owned me. Holy crud, that was hot.
Remember, I mean, in the mood of Easter, Jesus Christ was a socialist, folks. Remember that.
Oh yeah.
Trevor, I think. I was going to say, I thought you had some stuff to say.
I do have some stuff to say. I think it was really important that you brought up that not being in that space of relativity like frees up your like some of the crud for your mind for hopefully spending more mental energy on like this ideal version of like, cheap term for it, like a rising tide raises all boats. A raising tide rises all boats. You know what I mean?
A raising raises raise.
Yes. I think that's the one. I forgot who said it. I hope they don't mind.
I think it was in Deuteronomy. Anyway, because that's sort of what I was saying too, is like you become what you pay attention to. And so Swat's saying that like off this pendulum is this ideal place where we've switched like what's most important, where now our experience is in the foreground and our like anxieties are like in the background, still like organized and being addressed, but we're just like experiencing the world first. For that reason, it is sort of important to get off this particular pendulum, or in order to do that, to sort of deal with some of your bullshit on it in the first place, because to say that freeing up some of this like negative emotion will make you experience more is almost saying too little, because to be mindful and to experience would take 100% of your mental energy, not just a little bit more now that you've stopped looking at this person in a negative way.
And can I just say that
all yours.
feels like death? And like the moments that I've had of like the shifting into the space where I've felt my personality kind of like into it. It's been, that's when I've had the like mystical moments of like, oh my god, I'm going fucking insane. Like, and to bring it back to Jesus, one of the things, Luke, I'm gonna guess, if I'm fucking wrong, I don't care. But like in Luke, the gospel, Jesus says, "Take up your cross if you want to be my disciple. But die, motherfucker. If you want to see what's on the other side, take up your cross and fucking die, and you'll see what it's like to be integrated with creation. Get rid of all your relative bullshit."
That is what he said, wasn't it?
That totally verbatim.
I actually think he might have said "eat shit and die," but there's different translations.
Yeah.
It's the Bible. It's the most
that's the
sold book
problem.
in the world.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me interrupt you. I hope I didn't ruin your train of thought.
No, that was like a pretty short little thing I had right there, just saying that, like if you want to have that experience, like it's going to take 100% of your mental energy, and so anything that you then allocate to important stuff, but stuff that isn't just like the here and now and becomes relative, like not to say that it's the end of the world that has to happen, is you're going to become that percentage less mindful. You're going to be experiencing what's going around you by that degree,
right?
So obviously the more mental space you can give to that, the better, and the farther you can leave behind this kind of push and pull of like, this feels like the wrong way to go to the direction I'm going, that feels the right way, but this is easier, and everything like that. That pendulum, if you will. And it's this new term for this I just thought of.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. Yeah.
Paradoxically, you are experiencing all the time. Like, you don't have a choice not to experience. It's
right.
just like,
so mindfulness maybe is the best thing that I'm trying to say here to describe experience, but actually like going through your mind and thinking, wow.
Yeah. As we established in the end of last episode, you don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice.
Which also, folks, if you didn't listen to that one, that ending was pretty darn phenomenal.
I gotta go through
the ending was, I think the ending was better because like it was kind of like such a perfect, I think, tying of so many random disparate things we talked about last time. It was just like, oh my gosh, we nailed that one.
Yeah, we saw
like we were flipping and twirling and not knowing what was happening.
And then we just stuck the landing.
But the landing made everything else make a lot more sense, I feel like. So I was happy about that.
Righteous. You had another thing, Trev, that you mentioned, I think, before we got on, of like another topic that you wanted to bring up.
Oh, would it be a short one?
I don't know, maybe.
I know of a lot that we could rip open.
I have a note about it, I think. It had to do something with like listening and reacting. That's what I wrote down. Listening versus reacting.
I hope you were practicing active listening and that this is actually true. Otherwise, that'll be a little ironic.
Yeah. How hilarious.
Credibility gone.
Yeah.
See you at Mike's canceled.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Last time I would have mentioned it, maybe. Single track thing. Hey, I'll tell you what. You've got it on your notes. If you want to start something on it, I don't know if I had it specifically, but
yeah. Actually, it kind of ties in really well with this like relative space versus experience space of listening versus reacting is kind of this idea of when we are in this like relative thought space and every thought that comes takes us away. That is a reactive sort of experience. You're not engaging with any thoughts, but they are taking you. You are acting upon them immediately. You do not know if those thoughts are true or not. You don't care because they were thought, and so they take you. And then listening is this kind of like other side of like a thought comes and you see it come and you engage with it and you can see it and you can say, well, what are you doing here? Or, I mean, okay, kind of the two schools of thought that I've found in my experience of like contemplative practices is sort of like breathing meditation, concentration meditation, of sort of witnessing the impersonality of thoughts. Of a thought comes, you see it come, you're doing your breathing, whatever, and then the thought leaves. If you try to think something, that thought will also leave. If you try to hold on to a thought, if you're really in a meditative space, no matter how hard you try to think of a purple elephant, eventually you'll stop because that thought will go. And so that sort of opening space meditation is one school of thought, and the other one is a very engaging school of thought, where a particular thought comes and you engage in kind of like a what's a head to head in French? Ta ta te ta 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 te ta whatever. I'm trying to learn French, and I know there's a phrase in French that's head to head, and it's like TETA dash TETA or something like that. Ta te ta, and
Coup d'etat.
coup d'etat. Together the head something. The contemplative practice of engaging with thoughts is, let's say I have a thought, maybe I brought this up. Let's say I have a thought of like, I don't know, but basically you figure out if, like, is that thought true? Like, can you absolutely know that thought is true? How does that thought make you feel? And then what would your life be like without that thought? And through this process, thought comes, you believe it's true. You ask the question, it exists in the space of inevitability. I don't want to die, whatever it is. Dying is going to be bad. It exists in this space of relativity, or space of inevitability. And asking the question, is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? All that does is bring it from a space of inevitability to where it actually exists in life, in its experience, which is uncertainty. Which is like, I'm going to go to the store today. Is that true? I don't know. I can't, like, no, really. I decided to go to the store. I'm going to get in my truck. I'm going to back out of the driveway. I'm going to drive there. But will I get there? I don't know. I don't get to decide. And then the next part, how does that make you feel, is you get to witness how thoughts interact with your being and your experience because of this whole weird matrix umbrella. And when you ask the question, how does that thought make me feel? Sometimes you'll realize that what you're doing when you believe a certain thought is you're sticking your hand in a hot oven and just like grabbing the metal grate. And naturally, when you look at a thought that's hurting you, like, my mother doesn't care about me. You know, is that true? My mother doesn't care about me. Of course it's true. Can you absolutely know it's true? Well, no, I can't know what my mother cares or doesn't care about. How does that thought make you feel? Well, it makes me feel worthless. It makes me feel the absolute worst. Well, if that thought isn't true and you can't know it's true, and you have that relationship to it, you will naturally move away from it. You can't drop it. You can't get rid of it. But when you can see how it interacts and works in the whole machinations of your life, and you're truly listening, you'll naturally move away from it. And then the last question, what would your life be like without it, is the sort of thing of like, what are you moving to? Well, if I didn't have the thought that my mother didn't love me, then when I spent time with my mother, I would be able to be with her and love her more freely because I wouldn't be worried about her not loving me. Does any of that seem compelling?
Well, it's interesting how, like, you're accepting of or like embrace of uncertainty, but also embrace of questioning things as they come to you, like, literally impacts your like way of being. Like how you said, like, oh, like, you accepting that it's probably not true that your mom doesn't love you, like, allows you to feel more loving and present with her when you're there. I feel like as I was saying it, I was kind of like stumbling on some of the terms because it's like, on one hand you're like releasing yourself from like certainty, but at the same time you're like kind of like
Right.
constantly like not like checking the validity or truth of things, but you're kind of investigating. Like it's like very pure like inquiry, which I guess the purest of inquiry can only really happen when you kind of have like a sense of release from like, I guess, like predetermined, or as you said, like inevitable conclusions.
Right. And if the goal is to experience as much as you possibly can,
yeah,
then like the purest way to get there could be through that sort of like opening to it. Right. Trev, do you have any thoughts? I wanted it to be more of a question, which is why I wanted it to bounce off of you, because the lecture sort of style doesn't really feel very open to a groovy conversation, baby.
I know what you're saying, but that one, listening to it, I felt like if I'm listening to someone explain, like, say, here's this breathing exercise. All right, real quick, this is how you do it. You know, there's not much to it. It's breathing. And here's then they could spend like a while longer being like, here are all like the cool thing, like how it'll make you feel. It'll make you feel great. It did this for this person. And you're like, could be listening to all of it and be like, yeah, sweet. But like mostly I just like kind of just like, that does sound legit. I want to go try it out. And so listening to that, it's like, no, it seems like there's something I could really gain from it. But like, I also won't have, you know, too much to use until I like put it into practice. So it's like hearing about like a breathing exercise, maybe.
Well, let's go into like reactionary responses to thoughts. Kind of like, what sort of things do you think really hit your buttons? Because these are the good things to contemplate on, especially with that engaging style of like, what sort of beliefs or things are you holding on to so dearly that is shaping your relative alienated atomized life? Because when we started talking about the motivational thing, initially you were like, this might be like, I can see that we're on a pendulum, and the current trend is that like getting off the pendulum is like the mindful, cool, groovy thing to do. But this pendulum might be one that is useful to me. Am I right in remembering that? And then after we talked more, it shifted. So yeah, what sort of things, like, I mean, we can start with me. One of my, I guess I don't even believe that anymore, but like, I need to figure out something with my life is one. That's something I come back to a couple times. It's like, and that is we talked about it one time of like, that is a thought that causes stress and anxiety, because here I am in a retreat center doing fuck all, and the whole universe seemingly is shouting at me to be productive, do some labor, get some capital, figure your shit out. That's the American system. If you want to survive, that's what you got to do. And so working through, I find myself reacting to that thought a lot. And I'm just curious if you can ruminate on what reactionary thoughts you have.
Yeah, it's definitely
for those of you at home as well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a big ask. I feel like that's something I could come back next time and have a whole list of. So I'm just trying to think of ones that are like easy. This might not fit sort of like where your mind is with this question, but as you were posing it, one thing that I thought of immediately with reactionary listening versus truly listening. And this isn't necessarily even like a negative one. I'd say like one thing that I love to do more than just about anything. I like love when it happens. You're just like sitting, you're with a bunch of people that you like, and you're all just kind of like shooting the shit, you know, like making each other laugh, like ripping jokes. I feel like it's something that I'm pretty decent at, and I really enjoy doing. And when I'm in that situation, like, you know, you're all kind of like, it's a bit of a contest. You're all like jockeying for just like the best hit of like a line of the night, you know, but like there's no shame in it. But I know I'm sitting there, I'm like taking in what other people are saying. It's a little cocky, but I feel like active listening has never really been something like a problem for me or something that I focus on. Like I noticed that most conversations, even if I kind of catch my mind drifting a little bit, like I can recall it next time I see them and be like, this is what we talked about last time. This is where their thoughts on it. But that, you know, it's just an invitation to like tighten up my standards even more and be even more mindful when I'm listening. So in this space where we're just like making jokes, I know that when people are saying something, I like, you know, I've got like 20%. I'm like hearing it come in, but then I'm like, then over here, like, oh man, what's the next thing that I can say? And, you know, it's like, you can't not listen. Like your jokes have to be based on what other people are saying, or like callbacks to earlier in the conversation, which is like the best. Like you have to be listening, but you know, you're not going to be funny if you're just sitting there and true, right? You know, waiting for people to be like, what do you think? You know, like that can't happen. So I also, like, as much as I enjoy that, you know, I guess maybe making sure that that doesn't like permeate into other parts of my life, or like thinking that way is going to ruin my understanding of how this person feels.
Right.
So, but all right, so that was just my thoughts initially, but the question of like what kind of reactionary thoughts do you have is a good one too.
Yeah. I mean, that's like a life practice, I guess, you know. Like one of my meditation practices is like sending out a radar signal of like what's getting me, what's catching me, what's hitting this mind like a brick house, maybe. But I thought it was hilarious what you mentioned about like, I think, so here's my theory on our space as friends, and it is, I was explaining this to Hannah, my partner, that we make a safe place through humor, in that the act of telling a joke is like a kind of like a trust fall. It is a vulnerability tester. It is, I'm going to take off a little bit of my clothes. I'm going to show you a nipple. Are you going to laugh? And we, as friends, whoever comes into our group, we welcome them in their whatever they think in a way that I've never seen before. In like, even when people slip up, we're like, we'll be there to help you. You know, like you can fall into our arms. You made a bad joke. Come here. Let's have fun together and move on. You know? And so like I feel like when you talked about like the jocular like wanting to like have the best like hit, it like kind of messed with my perception of that a little bit, because it's like maybe it's just my experience of it as like a vulnerable space where I can be with friends, and it might be your experience too, but like the like moving through it as one body that's like laughing, joking, and kind of like a feedback loop of like being in each other humorously, and like moving through that space. And what I found in spaces that are similar levels of like funny, like I'm gonna bust my gut at the same rate, but aren't at the same level of vulnerability and lovingness, I find that it is vast different experiences. Even though I'm laughing the same amount, the experience of like our vulnerable little like, we have you, even if you fuck up, we're gonna continue on, we're gonna like have our time together, and we're gonna take off our clothes, and it's gonna be great. Like, I haven't found that experience in any other group that I've been in. Graham, what do you guys say?
It's just interesting because like I totally agree. And like Swat, you and I have talked about this before, just like this sort of like unique nature like our little circle had, where it's like you could sub out or like add any one individual and like things would still be like comfortable, like as you said, like welcoming. And it's interesting because like you lay out these, you know, two different sort of like jocular circles, one of like this welcoming sort of space of like vulnerable people that are still participating in the sort of like joke off, like, you know, like who's gonna have the funniest riff, who's gonna make the funniest line. And then like the other one where it's like the same thing, but like perhaps less vulnerability or less like mutual, like agreed upon trust that like everyone knows about, like Wikipedia. And but the thing is that like so for the former, the more, you know, positive, welcoming space of, you know, buddies that are kind of like, even if you fuck up, we're here for you kind of thing. You can make another joke, we'll probably laugh, and like you might get better at it. Is that so like in the broader discussion we're having about like reactive and like sort of like reactive listening, reactive behavior versus like experiential versus sort of like inclusive, relinquished. Where does that sort of vulnerable, like how can we like apply this framework to this like interesting instance of like the sort of reactive nature of like, oh, everyone's reacting to each other's jokes and trying to, you know, like shift their own joke based on what someone else said.
Right.
Like how can we conceptualize that, but the positive environment of it in this sort of like broader discourse about reactive behavior, reactive listening? Like how can we dig into this? Because I think it's interesting that like that isn't like some sort of like higher level behavior. Like we're still kind of like ripping off each other, reacting to each other, kind of like seeing ourselves in relations to other, but like in a sort of positive outcome. Like it's very much like both in terms of like positive and like everyone's happy about it, everyone's feeling good, but also like it's not like degrading you in a certain way or like making you, it's not separating you from people, it's actually bringing you even closer, it's like harmonizing you with other people.
I would say that's exactly it. I mean, this is something that I have it as like its own full episodes worth of discussion, but I think the big difference is just every person in that group's attitude. Like, what's your goal? Is it separation or is it unity? Like you said, I mean, the big thing is that like if you're in that group and like everyone's goal is like we're gonna have a good time and we're gonna laugh our asses off like together versus either from like on like or like on a predatory side of it, like we're gonna make jokes at this person's expense, or on like sort of, you know, the meeker side, like I got it like a line, but if I tell this joke and it falls flat, I'm gonna be devastated and uncomfortable. But yeah, like if like you have a good enough majority of this group that the attitude is just like we're here with each other, you know, like no matter what, you know, like we're gonna have a good time, no one's out to get you, like enough people are in the mindset of unity, that's how you can sort of like, I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure if that's the question you're going for when because I don't know how to tie this to like your like reactionary thoughts, but that's like I think the biggest difference to having like that sweet spot of a space versus if you have too many people that are thinking about like separation and like how can we like drive a wedge to that puts me in the better group, because there has to be a lesser group. You know, once that happens, then that whole synergy just absolutely crumbles.
Because and we were kind of getting into this earlier, just like the initial conversation about all this was very individualistic, very like about yourself and not like the fact that you're sharing these relationships and anxieties and feelings with other people. So perhaps like it's not that reactiveness or reaction is bad, it's just the idea that like if you're only thinking about you reacting to others and not others also reacting to yourself and other people, then it can be a bad thing. But like take reaction to be something that it's not you just reacting to people, it's we react to each other, then you're kind of accounting for each other's reactions. And like if you can account for each other's reactions to each other, And as you say, like kind of like, oh, sorry, I thought I got kicked out, but it was just a pop-up. But as you say, sort of like
porn pops ups from viruses, am I right?
right, yeah, we all relate. But like if you kind of like account for these reactions and reactionary like anxieties with each other and create a space where like we acknowledge that we're reacting to things, but we're reacting to them together, then it's good vibes all around.
Yeah.
So maybe like if we were to return to some sort of like pendulum construction, it wouldn't like necessarily be like, oh, reactivity on one side and like experience on the other. It would be a bit more complex. And perhaps because there's sort of like different sort of strains to this, it isn't necessarily just like a same to same pendulum that you try to escape. It's just that like
it's one of those balls with the motorcycle guy inside. He's like fucking everyone.
Yeah. Well, hopefully motorcycle guys.
Motorcycle guys.
Multiple
gays. Or
motorcyclists.
Women's. Or them's.
Motorcyclists. Yeah,
motorcyclists. Thank you.
Yeah, they're all in this chaotic ball of fumes, and as Trevor said, carbon dioxide.
Carbon monoxide.
And it's easier to just monoxide. Sorry,
you gave way too many oxygens, dude.
Sorry.
You need half as many oxygens in that metaphor.
Dude, we're getting oxygenated in here. Oh man, I wrote down while you were talking that reaction is a part of experience. So it's not necessarily like reaction itself, but like what are you reacting to? Are you reacting to experience, or are you reacting to thought? Yeah, and so if it's thought reaction, it's alienating and it feels gross and it feels lonely and it feels scary and you need to be funnier and you need to have people like you. But if you're reacting to experience, it's a funny joke. And I think one of the ways in our friend group that knocks us into the notch of going over towards the experience side is that like maybe it's like our style of humor, where oftentimes you don't have the prerogative as a listener to understand. That is to say, oftentimes we don't make any fucking sense. And in our senselessness, together we make sense. And it's only in our like, we each pull the rug out from each other and start falling and look at each other falling. And it's like someone's talking about like not enough oxygen molecules in your carbon, and it goes off onto another thing, and it goes off onto another thing. And if you are trying to make sense of it, you are not with us, and that feels lonely. But if you can get into that flow state of just reacting to the experience of what's happening right now, you'll figure out that actually what's happening is really fucking hilarious.
Yeah, no one has any better of a handle on it than anyone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Hannah was like getting frustrated. Well, like we were talking and she was like, but like I don't understand what you guys are saying, and I was like, neither do we. There's so many times where like I'll like reference something that we did at Brookstock and she'll be, but like that wasn't that like an inside joke, like you guys were in on it. I was like, no, the only thing we were in was love, it wasn't an inside joke. He said something nonsensical and then I said something nonsensical. Like you either come along and love with us, or you stay behind and you feel alienated and lonely, but we'll still love you, baby.
Yeah.
We'll love you with our humor sticks, all up in your business.
Yeah, I guess that putting it back into the space of just like a bunch of dudes riffing, saying that reacting to the experience feels good and is natural, and that's kind of where we want to give everyone. Whereas reacting to thoughts is like usually wrong, chances are you're like not gonna like those thoughts that are coming in. That almost, it's like, it's sort of this snowballing effect too, because if you this isn't quite as like, I'll continue.
Go for it.
We love you.
We're here.
You're sitting there, a bunch of dudes just like chilling, and like timing is like crucial as you're just like making these dumb jokes. If you're you
Oh, if you're
listening,
if you
reactionary listening.
it cut out at if you're.
Okay, so if we sort of started this where you're either like reactionary listening
Mhm.
or like listening to like really like understand it. And it seemed like reactionary was sort of wrong, but I like this better way of putting it where it's you reacting to experience versus thoughts.
Mhm.
So if you're in the space, you're all making jokes, this timing's really important. If you even let it get to the point where someone's made a joke, then you think about that, you think about your response, and then you think about how that thought might go, and then you're being defensive because you're reacting to the thought. You've already way missed your chance to like make that joke. Whereas
Yeah.
the experience is that's hilarious. Something comes to mind, and then you just fire it off. Like you're going to perpetuate that like feel goodness. Whereas if you let that reaction to thoughts, like then you're just going to like drag the whole tempo down.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so there it is again. Like we said, like if you sort of stay bogged down in these things of like reaction and like kind of like comparison and contrast, it's not just like, oh, like it makes you feel bad or makes you like it sucks, but it also like it's your ability to do other things. The capacity, again, like it takes up capacity. You don't get the timing of the joke. You don't, like you're bogged down in the comparison and like looking at the people you want to emulate and the people you don't want to emulate, that it's burdening.
Right. Or you're worried about how much you're laughing or not laughing, or
Oh yeah, that's big too. Like I feel like I should be enjoying myself more right now,
right?
But not. And that sucks.
Look at that weird dude with the beard. He's crying right now.
Yeah, it does take up bandwidth, which if you're just trying to react to the experience and enjoy the experience, you need all that space to be fully present there with your friends at that point. But also going back to what Swat said about like the typical impersonality of thoughts, like it could be that if the better you understand that, the more you might be in this situation. You're like hang up about something that's happening, comes along, you see it, you're like you know what, like I get that this thought is there, it's probably not for me right now. I'm going to have the strength to just let it roll by so I can stay invested in what's going on.
Right. Yeah. And I think like with our like support, our like safety net of like, hey, I'm gonna catch you if you like make a mess up, helps people get past their like thoughts of like, oh shit, I accidentally said something that was like racy, and like this isn't a crowd for that, and like, or like, oh, they're not into like offensive jokes or something, or like this isn't a space where we exploit other people's like defectiveness and like put people down. And then but that's met with support from us continuing of like be in our joke space, be with us and have fun. What I found oftentimes in other spaces that are more alienating is someone makes like a racy joke or a sexist joke or something that's like offensive, and it doesn't hit, and that person is done. You are alienated now. Get out of our joke space, motherfucker. You made a bad joke, you made a mistake, and you know it. Whereas we're like, yeah, that was dumb. Why'd you say that? Come over here and have fun with us where we love each other instead of fucking wanting to like be hateful.
And again, that's the agency. The agency to not just be like, you're not just reacting to other people, but people are reacting to you, and like you're all influencing each other. And like
you're not just participating in this space, you're creating it.
Yes. And if
victory,
again, what we said last time, you don't have a choice. Either way, you are participating and creating. So like, what are you participating in? What are you creating? It's either something that will also encourage other people to think about that and think about what they're participating and creating in, or you're gonna push them to the things that you yourself are avoiding. So yeah, I love that Swat. That's so true. And I mean, some of this is tough because it's like, yeah, well, like that's all good and fine, but like, what can I do? Like, how can this is still like, as we said, it's natural tendencies. It's like, it's natural to like compare yourself to people or react to people or just always be thinking about like, what if I say this, or what if I do this? What if I don't do this? And at least in the short term, sure, it is about like finding the positive people that can help you foster that. But in the long term, hopefully it's a sort of like building that mutual agreed upon space such that you can welcome other people too.
Yeah, just nurturing this like attitude that you can like take with like when SWAT. One problem that I have, sort of with like the very first like instance of the pendulum, like keep like driving towards, your materialistic goal, become a better person. Is SWAT, you're saying like we have this like nurturing space, in this like sort of toxic side that's hard to get rid of, and I never fully will, is like, yeah, that's great, but you don't want to spend your whole life in your comfort zone. And I was like, sure. That's true. You're going to have conversations with people that you aren't like best buds with, obviously. But I think that as you create this, it's not that you can't go outside your comfort zone, but if your comfort zone is like a space where everyone feels included and loved, and, you're around people who want the best for you and they want your jokes to land, you can sort of just like take your comfort zone, like put it in your backpack wherever you go, just drop it in this new conversation, and like this is your comfort zone now through love and empathy for the people that you're with.
Right. Also, like one thing, like vulnerability. I mean, this is a huge conversation that I think I brought up a couple times in the last couple episodes, but like vulnerability is the opposite of the comfort zone. But it just so happens that like sometimes being out of the comfort zone doesn't feel uncomfortable. Because when we talked about being so vulnerable that instead of being armored and fighting everything off, you're so vulnerable that you can take everything in. And so it doesn't become a comfort zone, but it becomes a motherfucking I'm here zone, baby. And I'm going to take all your shit, and I'm going to take all your fucking posing and all your whatever you think is best about you and how much you need to be funny and how much we all need to be together, and I'm going to be so naked in front of you that you have no choice but to be in love with me.
It's the episode of SpongeBob where he's worried about getting his ass kicked by the fish that has both eyes on the same side of his head. And then he's just like, he's like, no, I can't take it, and then finally he just gives up. And then he realizes that he's soft enough that this dude can pummel him and he doesn't feel any of it. And he just molds to the shape of this dude's fist. Yes. And the guy just gets exhausted from it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Totally. Yeah, because it is not comfortable accepting people who don't come off to you as people you want to be. Remember? We're talking about Jesus, baby.
Precisely.
You don't want to go up to a leper. You don't want to go up to a prostitute or a tax collector. Those people fucking suck. But if you can get there, you realize that, baby, everything can be taken with dignity, with love, and you don't need to fucking hate, baby. I don't know who I turned into there. That character is weird.
New character I've been working on.
Chip is, yeah. Hey,
okay, wait. Sorry, I got this new character for you guys. Baby.
Wait. Hey,
that's my type 5.
You want to hear this Prem impression I've been working on?
Here we go.
Oh, wait, hang. Give me who's Prem talking to?
He's talking to me, Tyler. SWAT.
Oh, he's talking to Tyler. Okay, SWAT. All right. All right. Huh, SWAT. Hello, my friend.
It's so good. Okay, now do me.
All right. So give me the context. What's SWAT doing?
I'm at a hockey game and I just saw Zach playing on drumline.
Okay, so you're at the hockey game. Have you had like a couple of drinks, or are you sober?
I don't drink much. I'll be sober.
Okay, sweet. You just ran into Zach at the hockey game. Have you seen Zach in a while?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. So good friend from high school. You probably haven't seen him in like a good year. Yeah. All right, here we go. And scene. Huh, Zach, my friend. Hello.
Such a good impression, man.
Nailed it.
Thank you.
Man.
Nailed it. Wow.
Those are just a couple of the characters I'm working on.
Oh gosh. Jeez, could you imagine what it would be like if we were in a room together where we didn't have the internet timing?
Yeah.
I think about that sometimes. That would
Yeah.
be a dream
Big.
come true. Hey,
'Cause,
100
yeah,
episode special. We're all together, and
Yeah. Because first you're like we're as we said, we're calculating the riffs. We're in the riff zone, in a
Yeah.
positive riff zone, but we're still like, what's the next riff? But then it's not just your timing; it's the timing of like the delay. You
Right.
know.
Mhm.
yeah. I gotta pee.
So how about that? Oh, yeah.
How about that? What?
My timing, my comedic
Yeah,
timing.
it was ruined. Here, come here, baby. We'll take you.
Don't let it happen again.
Yeah. Your jokes have to be S quality only.
I will say that was actually a meta joke because there wasn't
wasn't.
actually a punchline. It was just going to be a so how about that airplane food? It was like a deep cut about like the timing. There was like layers to it.
Right.
I mean, some comedy it just kind of takes like like you gotta have to think about it a little bit.
It's
There's
like
a little-
fine wine. Like if
you
you gotta taste a whole bunch and build a palate.
It's
like a parfait.
Philosophy.
Everybody love a parfait. Parfait might be the most delicious thing on the whole damn planet.
I laughed a lot in this episode.
Yeah, me too.
How do you guys feel? Any
I feel
wrapping
good.
I
up
feel good.
comments?
I always feel good, man.
Yeah.
Glad we got it
Yeah.
in, even though we skipped Sunday.
Yeah,
I always forget that this podcast gives me more energy than it takes from me.
Right.
yeah, agreed. Like before, it's like, oh man, like it's late, like it's been a long
It's
day.
gonna be
but then
it's gonna be a
afterwards,
couple hours of me
Right.
like either like intently listening, using energy that way, or talking. But then I walk out like, man, that's right.
I love you guys so
That's
much.
how that feels.
Yeah. When I worked
it's
at
energizing.
the camp and I had to do like go to a church somewhere in a random ass place in western North Dakota and like lead a bunch of kids and some activities for like 4 hours. I always like before I was like, oh man, like can I drive safe enough into this ditch that I can call them and say that I'm stuck in a ditch and, and then on my way back I'm like, God, I fucking love this. Like why did I ever doubt that I wanted to hang out with children for like 4 hours and sing songs and be silly? Like that's totally what I'm into. That's what I've always been into,
Why would you doubt that? Yeah.
But like on the way out there I'm like, God, fuck this.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Shall we?
Peace out.
See you at Mike's.
All right, boys.
Um,
See you at Mike's.
Cheers.
Shit, I fucked the timing. All right, all together now. 3, 2, 1. See you at Mike's.
See you at Mike's.
Happy birthday to
you.